Hi everyone, this is Tim Lightfellow again. Next video in a series about making arrows or crossbow bolts. The set I'm currently working on and using as an example is a set of hickory, which has a few characteristics that are different than the normal woods we tend to use, but overall the process is the same. So, there's already a video I've done about preparing new shafts so they're ready to be straightened. I've done 2 videos on straightening. One covered the standard wood, spruce, cedar, that type of wood. The other one covers hardwoods such as these hickory shafts. The next step is this: once you've prepared the shafts, you've got them straight, the next step is to cut them to the length you need. So in this case, again, I'm doing bolts. So the ones I'm doing, I'm measuring half a shaft length. So I'll show you that in a moment. But for people who spend a lot of time making arrows, my mentor had a really useful tool that was basically a 2x4 with a channel cut through the middle. But it left enough of the wood at one end so you'd put the shaft against that end, and then it had pre-cut channels every inch. So instead of having to measure each shaft like I do for bolts, you would literally just say, oh, I need 29-inch arrows. We'll throw the shaft in, make sure it's against the back end, go to the 29 mark and cut. So, there are ways to speed up the process for those who do it more frequently. Again, since I'm doing bolts and I've run into some people want 16-inch, some want 18, some want 20. I haven't had a reason to create a jig like that, so I'm going to show you just using basic tape measure pencil how I go through this. I'm going to change the angle of the camera, which is unfortunately going to be pointed right in my chest and not my face, but this will let me show what I'm doing. So I take the arrow shaft, I am taking the tape measure, and again, I'm looking for half the shaft length. So what I'm doing is I'm actually measuring all the way to the end and looking at what it is. In this case, it's 32 1/8. So I'm going to be marking this at 16 1/16, which is right about there. And I'm trying to put a straight line. I want the line to be visible enough to see it when I put it into the jig. So I actually have about 7 shafts, because one of them had some damage on one end, so I couldn't get the 2 out of it, and so the company I ordered these from sent me an extra shaft. So I've measured and marked all the others already. I didn't figure everyone needed to watch me doing that process over and over again. So you'll notice that I have pencil marks marking where I want to cut it. So the next step is to cut them. In order to do that, I will first off change the camera angle again, because talking to you while you're staring at my chest seems strange. So what I use, since I don't have the aforementioned jig that my mentor did, is I use a miter box. And what this allows me to do is literally put the pegs where I need them so they can pinch the shaft in place. And then I'm using what's called a dovetail pole saw. I'm going to try, okay, that side. I was going to say, I'm going to try and show you without showing you brands, because I'm certainly not pushing any specific brand. But the benefit of these is it has really fine teeth on it, which gives you a good solid cut. And in my experience with all the woods, the hardwoods and the softer woods, I haven't had any issues with it, cutting partway through and then breaking it or something and causing it to splinter out. So it gives me good clean cuts on all the shafts, which is important when you're trying to cut them to length. So I will next be setting up. I'll grab the first shaft. In this part, I'm sorry, it's kind of off camera because of the way things are set up in this room. I can't really show you this step, but what I'm doing right now is I'm moving those pegs so that they will pinch the shaft. I can show you once it's set up. So I move the pegs to the appropriate holes so that they can pinch it. Obviously, I don't want to go super tight and indent the shaft, but they're going to hold it in place so I can cut it. And I've got the mark facing up so that when I put the saw in this slot, I can make sure I'm cutting right where I marked. So I'm going to just take the pole saw. I'm going to line it up on the mark and cut. When I'm done, it's an easy twist to release them. And I now have 2 short shafts. I am going to do this process for all of these, so bear with me. It should go fairly quickly, but using Microsoft Teams, I haven't really found a way to pause and start recording again so that you don't have to watch all this. Hence the reason I did all the measuring beforehand, except for the one piece, so that you wouldn't have to sit and watch all that as well. When I take them out, I try to make sure that I'm putting the end I cut at the same end on all of them, because the next thing I'm going to do after I do this, which is I will go through that process in just a moment, because I don't really want to try and talk over the noise of the cutting. And you'll notice how fast it does go if you've pre-measured them and you just have to line up the saw to the mark and cut it and then let go. And again, as I mentioned, there are other ways you could make your own jig out of wood or out of something else. I just found that the miter box was inexpensive. It was something I could easily afford to purchase because it didn't cost very much at the local hardware store. And I don't have tools like routers and that to try to make myself a jig. And so this was a quick, easy solution, an expensive solution, and lets me make crossbow bolts and arrows. The way this pinches the shafts, it can be a little more tricky on arrows, especially if I'm needing them to be, like, 30, 32 inches. It can be hard because I end up with only one of the pegs that'll pinch the shaft at all. So it can be a little harder there then, but most of the time I'm doing crossbow bolts, and it works great for that because you're pinching, you're lining up the center of the shaft. So what you'll notice is they're pretty close. These hickory shafts I noticed were anywhere from just barely over 16 inches to about 16 1/4 inch long. Hence, even cut in half, there's noticeable difference. So the next step I will do, and the next step I would do even with wood that was spruce or cedar, and the shafts are pretty much the same length, is I will now take these down to the disc sander, and I will sand them down so that they're closer to the same length. With hardwoods, you have to be careful about overheating, so I will probably have to do several rotations of kind of grinding them down a bit at a time to try and get them to the same length. That's not a concern with spruce or cedar. I've been able to grind, an eighth of an inch or whatever off all at one time. I've never seen it turn dark or had any issues. So that'll be the next step. I'm not going to record that step. So the next video I do would be the piece after that, which in this case will be using the taper tool, getting the shafts tapered and then ready to be dyed or sealed or whatever you're choosing to do color-wise. Thank you for watching.